to me, true financial planning, you're looking at the whole holistic cash flow planning, tax planning, making sure the estate's up to date, that the insurance is up to date, and putting that big picture together to make sure it's congruent with what a client's goals are. So not every financial planner would, to me, rise to the MD level of financial planning, but thank goodness, I think financial planning is definitely making big inroads over the 20 plus years I've been in this profession.
Today on the Mitlin Money Mindset, we're redefining the way you think about wealth and well-being. Our guest, Dr. Carolyn McClanahan, went from saving lives as a physician to transforming financial futures as the founder of Life Planning Partners. She's a leading voice on how health and wealth intersect, featured by CNBC, Forbes, and the New York Times. If you want to future-proof your finances, navigate life's biggest transitions with confidence, and rethink what true financial security means, this episode is a must-listen. Get ready for insights that can change everything. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Mitlin Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Mitlin Financial. Let's dive into today's show. Well, I'm excited, Carolyn, to have you on the show today. We welcome Carolyn McClanahan, founder of Life Planning Partners. Thank you so much for being here today.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So listen, our listeners are fascinated by the entrepreneurial journey. Everybody is different, but there's a lot of similarities too. So, we'll talk a lot about what you're doing at Life Planning Partners today, but can you give our listeners like a 10,000 foot view of who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I am originally from Virginia and then moved to Florida. I was a doctor in family medicine and emergency medicine and was on faculty at University of Florida. My husband was an engineer and he hated being an engineer, and we tried to find a financial planner back in the late 90s. He had inherited some money in the mid 90s. We did quite well in the market, like everybody did back then. So he wanted to quit being an engineer. And everybody that we interviewed, it was really just about doing investments and not helping us figure out whether he could change careers, because he wanted to be a track coach and a photographer. And I said, honey, I am not going to support you, so you got to figure out whether this money is enough for you. So I went back to school for fun to learn about real financial planning so I could figure out whether he could change careers. And I fell in love with it. And I saw this huge need for people getting advice. So I opened Life Planning Partners in 2004 and haven't looked back. And, now I get the added benefit of helping advisors also navigate the intersections of health and finance. So in addition to my practice, I educate a lot of advisors on anything related to health and money.
Amazing. So your husband's career change effectively put you on a new trajectory as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved being a doctor actually, but after came down to it, it's like the business of medicine isn't very fun, and financial planning is a lot of fun. So I'm very happy with my change.
I agree with you. I have a lot of fun every day as well. So, was there an entrepreneurial background to you, or are you a first generation entrepreneur?
Well, gosh, no. My dad, he was career military and he retired after 20 years. Back then he was in his late 30s, and he opened a donut shop, and he was a baker, and I grew up working in a donut shop. So my dad very much was the entrepreneur, but that man worked 364 days a year. And I said, I will never own my own business because I do not want to work that hard. And so I think that's actually what kept me from doing something like this. And, I give kudos to my husband because we had a lot of savings. And so that made that switch of going from being a doctor to a financial planner much more palatable. Plus, I never let my medical license go. Just in case I failed as a financial planner, I could always go back to being a doctor.
That's great. Yeah, great story. So thank you for sharing that. And, I know you kind of just glossed over it a little bit, but I want to explore this whole idea of being an MD, right? Going through that training and everything you need to do to be a doctor like you are and you were, in traditional practice, and then a CFP. How did you end up what was the genesis and how did you think about like those two, uh, I guess, licenses, the license on the MD side and designation on the CFP side?
Mhm.
How did you come to be like bringing those together under one roof, so to speak?
Well, gosh, after I got into financial planning, I realized that financial planning is just like being a doctor, except that you are basically helping somebody with their financial health instead of their physical health. You do the exact same thing. You take a history. So in medicine, we take a medical history, and people, we take a financial history. Then you do an exam, and that means you look at all the data and then you make a diagnosis. And whether that's, here's, good financial health, bad financial health, and then you give instructions on what needs to be done to get them where they need to go. So exact same work. And of course, health is a lot more important, but they're both very, very important, because if you don't have health, it's hard to enjoy your money. If you don't have money, it's hard to keep good health.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're so intertwined. And, why do you think that being a doctor translated so, I mean, you said, right, that there was very similar, attributes, but I mean, is it that simple that we're pretty much, or you are like a medical professional for somebody's finances? Is it really as simple as that to some degree?
Well, if you're doing real financial planning, I mean, there are a lot of people out there who just do money management, and that's not being a real doctor. That's like being treating one part of the body. And I mean, because to me, true financial planning, you're looking at the whole holistic cash flow planning, tax planning, making sure the estate's up to date, that the insurance is up to date, and putting that big picture together to make sure it's congruent with what a client's goals are. So not every financial planner would, to me, rise to the MD level of financial planning, but thank goodness, I think financial planning is definitely making big inroads over the 20 plus years I've been in this profession.
And would you say, just out of curiosity, is the CFP designation, which I hold as well, do you feel like that is the
Hmm.
doctor level version of being a financial planner? Now, I know not everybody who has a CFP acts in that capacity, but if somebody does and has the desire to do that, is that really the designation to be looking for?
Yes, to me it is, and but you have to realize in medicine you have DOs, you have chiropractors. There are a lot of different types of doctors out there, and they're all trained a little bit differently. So I think the CFP designation is the one to look to know that people got a very broad-based training in good financial planning. The AICPA has the PFP certification, and then you have CFAs that have broader training in wealth management. And so they're, just because somebody isn't a CFP doesn't mean that they can't do broad-based financial planning. But I think when you see the CFP, that means that that person got the broad-based training to provide comprehensive planning.
Yeah, I think that was a good point because you're right. There are many different versions of, doctor out there, and I think we have the same thing in our profession for that matter. So, let's talk about because we talk about, and our listeners are very interested in the interaction between health and wealth.
Hmm.
And you mentioned it earlier. You kind of went down the path that health is more important, and I tend to agree because if you don't have your health, it doesn't matter about your wealth, right?
Hmm.
So they are inextricably really linked up. So can you share your perspective on that and kind of your, I think you have a unique perspective coming from the medical side and now the financial side to share a perspective that maybe we haven't heard before or shared with our listeners on this show before.
Well, I think it's really important. I think planners in general do not do a good job of this, but we need to plan for who people are, not who they want to be. Everybody wants to live long and not have any problems throughout their life. But, if you have a client in their 40s and 50s and they're overweight, they're using toxic substances or hanging out with too many toxic people, that person doesn't have great life expectancy. And so we need to quit planning to age 100 for those people. And likewise, for the people who are living a long time, that, we do plan for longevity, but you got to put a lot more thoughtful planning for aging and cognitive decline, because the longer you live, the bigger the chance you have of getting cognitive decline. So this is something I'm actually working on with the CFP board. I'm on the CFP board Resource Commission, Standards Resource Commission. And this year we're actually focusing on working with aging clients, because advisors do a poor job of dealing with the issue of cognitive decline until it's way too late. And so I have a process I've been using for years on how to put things in place so that if cognitive decline develops, a client is going to be much better taken care of, and you're watching out for them on a higher level than what most advisors are doing now.
Yeah. And I mean, there is this, level of agree that you have that, I don't have. And I don't know, you might even be a unicorn in terms of people who have a medical background and the financial planning background. Do you find yourself having conversations from a medical perspective with the families that you work with because of that unique perspective? Or is that something you just kind of touch on in the conversations at a high level?
Well, I want to be clear in that talking about things like aging and cognitive decline, that's not necessarily medical. I mean, we all,
Agreed.
when you're over 60, the risk of dementia doubles every 5 years. And we've all had family members who are dealing with issues. Even if you don't get dementia, you may get mild cognitive impairment or just frailty with aging. And by understanding basics of aging, basics of the kind of health problems people get as they age, you can be a much better financial planner. And so if the conversations I have with clients around health and finances are not any conversation that a regular advisor couldn't do. Now, occasionally I get a client that has a serious medical issue, and then, sometimes my medical expertise does come in handy there. That's where I do a lot of education for advisors on planning for serious illness, things like ALS, MS, cancer, because there are a lot of things that advisors can do, even if they don't have a medical background, that can help those people with serious illness.
Yeah, I listen. Well, as you're talking about this, I'm having like a flashback to a family that we worked with that the husband used to come in always by himself, sharp as a tack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sharp as a tack. And he started coming in with the wife a couple of years earlier, and we started seeing them together. And at one point, I noticed that the husband, something was not right. And, the wife ended up using the restroom. And on her way back, I excused myself from the conference room and stopped her and said, "Hey, is something going on with your husband?" And she's like, "Yeah, we've been kind of noticing something." And, she was so super appreciative that I noticed it. I was aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was really, I think, something that solidified our relationship, because it was something that she felt comfortable confiding in us because we noticed it, observed it, and started having very early conversations with her about things that she needed to start thinking about, because that was, happening in those moments.
Yeah, it's super important to me to have the possibility of that conversation, well, to have that conversation about the possibility of cognitive decline in advance. And so actually in every client, we have a letter of authorization. If we're worried about them, we would bring it up with the client first. And if the client doesn't think something's wrong, we'll still call the family. And our letter gives us the authority to do that. And I think advisors are, too often I get calls from advisors, "I think I have this client with dementia." And it's like, you should have done something about that a long time ago, because you break confidentiality if the client doesn't want you to bring it up with other family members.
Right. Now they have that, secure contact, right? That
Mm-hmm.
people put on accounts for some of those reasons. So, what are your best tips, shifting now from the health of the families that we work with to a healthy relationship, right? What are your best tips for having a healthy relationship with your financial advisor?
Well, first off, I think there needs to be open, non defensive communication about everything. And so clients, when they're worried about something, they need to be comfortable telling the advisor that they're worried about something. And likewise, when advisors are talking to clients, we should do so with an open heart and non-judgmental about who they are and what they're doing, because our job is to take what they're doing and give them the best advice to do the right thing for themselves. And if clients aren't comfortable talking to you, then that puts a lot of roadblocks in place for providing good financial planning.
Imagine a relationship where financial conversations don't feel stressful, but actually bring you joy. We've designed a guide to help you have positive, meaningful money conversations with your partner. This isn't just another budgeting tool, it's a roadmap for building trust and connection. So if you're ready to start a joyful money journey with your partner, go to mitlin.us/couplesjoy and download your free guide. Transform your financial future together starting today. So, I mean, listen, what are some tips if I'm a financial advisor listening to this, right? What are some tips for me to, open up those lines of communication? Is just simply as having conversations with them, or are there specific things I should be having a dialogue with them about?
Oh goodness, I have this great talk that I did at NorCal a couple years ago called Bedside Manner for the Financial Planner. I used to teach the Bedside Manner class at University of Florida. And the first thing is always use open-ended questions. So tell me why you're here. Tell me how you learned about us. What are your biggest worries? And so using open-ended questions and then being quiet. There was a study a long time ago about how long does a doctor let a patient talk before they interrupt them. Do you have any idea?
I would say about 3 seconds.
You most people guess a little longer. It's about 19 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's like the problem is you just shut people down. And so it's important just to learn to be quiet, listen, and encourage them to say more. And so one of my favorite comments that I make to people when they're telling me something is, tell me more about that, because that gets them to open up even wider and wider. And then you can hone in on the situation. It's also important, though, to learn how to get people back on the track, because sometimes if you ask too many open-ended questions, you can't get to what you're doing. And so learning how to steer the conversation back to what's needed by bringing up points. And I actually have a formula that I teach my young advisors, and I teach other advisors, of how to manage a meeting, and basically send an agenda in advance. Make sure that you learn how to pay attention to the clock to keep to the agenda, and also summarizing everything at the end. Use a lot of paraphrasing. So when clients have said something to you, a lot of times clients will go on, and I will do a wrap-up summary of what they just said. And that makes them feel heard and make sure that you've captured it correctly.
Yeah, I think those are great tips for, building that relationship and making them feel comfortable if and when things should go awry, that they're comfortable having that conversation with you about what, may be bothering them, or maybe a pain point for them.
Yep.
So, how do we, with the families we serve, because I think that this comes up a lot, how do we combat feelings that, they're just collecting money for the sake of collecting money, right? Because I think there's a lot of focus in our profession about people building assets and working up to retirement, and not necessarily a lot of the conversation about why are they accumulating these assets, on the bigger scale. What joy are they looking to achieve from these assets? How do we combat that for the families we work with?
Well, first off, so another talk I do is titled, Are You Happy Now? And what we do with clients is when they come in, it's like, tell me about your life now. What are you doing that you enjoy? What would you like to be doing that you're not now that you could enjoy? And getting an idea of whether to them is money the tool or is it the object. And for too many people, money is the object, and that's not a great mindset, using your money mindset name there. And And so trying to morph their brain around how do I want money to fit into my life. And so the big thing that we do for clients is, a good cash flow analysis, especially initially, of how do you spend money, and is everything you're spending on bringing value to your life. It's funny, through the years I've seen more and more people have just these huge number of subscriptions, and it's like, how can you use all of these? And you find out they're not using a lot of them. So getting them to cancel the things that aren't even if they have plenty of money, it's like, well, why use it on things that are bringing no value to your life? So making sure all their spending is bringing value. And if it's not bringing value, what would bring value to their spending? The other thing we do is we do cash flow analysis every year. And even we have clients, with most of our clients have plenty of money. And the challenge that you run into is you don't want them just accumulating and not having a plan for what are they going to do with that. And especially, like, too many want to leave a legacy for their kids. Well, enjoy that legacy while you're alive and start giving it away while you're younger, so that they can enjoy it, so you can see them enjoy it, and so you can see if they're going to be responsible with it.
Yeah. I think those are great points, right? In terms of, we try to accumulate this, but we really need to have that why really laid out and understand that. And
right.
And I agree with you. It's, if something is in that spending that you're getting joy from, then that's one thing. If you're getting joy and can afford it, great. If you're not getting joy, whether you could afford it or not, it's, get rid of it. You could redeploy that in other places. So
right.
I think that's a great point. Now, one thing I found interesting about you is you give those you serve a clear set of expectations set out as engagement standards. And one of those is, we do not work with mean people.
That's
And,
true.
I love that. And I'd love to explore the joy that comes with serving those who you enjoy spending time with.
No, you're exactly right. We do not work with mean people. I don't phrase it. So our client engagement standards spell out what we deliver to clients and what we expect from them to do a good job. And if they can't agree with that, then we won't take them as clients. And I can tell you that has kept us from taking many clients who would not be ideal. And when you're serving people that your values resonate with, that what you do resonates with them, it just makes it for a joyful job. Work is such a big part of your life. If you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it? So that clause, the no mean people clause, basically says, if we're not enjoying and respecting one another, we need to reevaluate the relationship. And the beautiful thing about engagement standards is, if clients aren't following them, then we bring it up. And the two main reasons clients follow engagement standards: one, we say you have to be engaged and work with us on doing your ongoing financial planning. Some clients, it's like they do their initial financial plan, and it's hard to get them to re-engage. And that's super important, though, because financial planning is an ongoing process. We rarely have this problem, but every now and then we do, and we say, look, you're paying us for ongoing financial planning, but we can't get you to give us what we need to do that.
Right.
So I say, if you don't do it, we're going to fire you, and they do it. And so working with not mean people, I'm married to an engineer, so I can say things like this. Sometimes people who come from those technical professions don't always have the best bedside manner. I'm saying that as a doctor. And so engineers, software people, sometimes they're just like, they forget to be nice. And so with two clients, I've had to pull out, I know you're a good person because we've worked together a while, but it seems like you're getting this comfort where you're not being quite so nice all the time. And then I send them the engagement standards too. And I said, I want to have a conversation about this. And both of them that I had to do that with, they just turned it around. And I think, there's this great book called The Balanced Brain. And it talks about things that bring better mental health, and just being a joyful person makes you more joyful. So acting joyful can bring joy to yourself. So I like to say I helped improve their joyfulness.
There you go. There you
Yeah,
go. And I think to some degree, one thing that we found by we don't have that engagement standard, but we definitely, in writing, but we do have that standard because we've had situations where somebody who was a nice family just was not nice on a phone call. And I got on the phone and said, hey, that was not the way to handle it. And if you do it that way again, we're probably not going to work together. So we got to figure it out. And it's never been an issue since. But I also find that having those kind of standards, whether in writing or just verbally relay those to families, you also have a tendency to attract other people who are attracted to those standards, right? Who want to be
correct.
around other joyful people. So it almost acts as like a filter device because if somebody is not aligned with that, they may see it on your website and go the other way versus three other people might see that and be like, I have to talk to Carolyn because this is really in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. In fact, we have one of our things that we say we deliver is we return all phone calls within a day and emails within 2 days. And we have one very large client that read that and said, that's when I knew I was signing up. It's like, and it's amazing to me how many like advisors don't return phone calls. And, it's basic service.
I agree. I don't even know, to me, that doesn't even have to be in a service standard because that like should be the service standard. But I agree. It's not the case. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah. So, where does your passion for financial education come from? You can hear it in your voice clearly. When you look you up, you read about you and see what you're involved with. Something so passionate. You're talking about working with the CFP board on certain things as well. Where does that passion really derive from?
Well, I love just kind of making the world a better place. And in fact, I have you can't see my whiteboard in front of me, but it's my purpose is to live each day in love, joy, wonder, and balance and use my talents to be a positive force in the world. And I look at that every day up there. And for me, it's like I've been given so much. And it was Cheryl Holland of Abacus Planning I heard talk back in 2004 at a NAPFA conference, just talking about when you give from without expectation, it just comes back to you, a millionfold. And coming from the world of medicine is very not doctors aren't nice to each other. The whole medical world is just very tough, and I had not gotten over that scarcity, that mentality of dog eat dog world of medicine when I was exploring going into financial planning. And she said that, and I'm like, and she seemed like the happiest person in the world. And it's like that's who I want to be. I want to be that happy person. So I started just doing it as a practice. And then I realized, oh my God, it's so true. And so, I'm in this very fortunate position of coming from two professions where I see things that it's not because I'm brilliant or anything. I get to see things that others don't see just from the vantage point of coming from two separate worlds. And so I want to give that back. And, if there's a legacy I could leave, it's to change how we think about the intersections of health and finance. And I think I'm doing a little bit of that, so it feels good.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. I mean, they're such a they're just so tied, and I think it gets overlooked quite often because just simple things like having money and taking a trip today versus waiting till you're in your 60s or 70s when
Oh, right.
you have a question mark. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, maybe you won't be able to, right? So I think those are all important questions, and they're inextricably tied. So I'm going to take a 180 here for a minute. And, one of the things I heard you share was that one of the catalysts for you finally leaving medicine full time was finding out that you were not paid equally as your male counterparts. And, how do you think we can address that pay inequality?
Pay transparency. I mean, which you rarely see. In my firm, all my employees see all the books. They know what everybody gets paid, and it's hard. Not for me, but it's hard for a lot of advisors to share that because they don't want the people know what they're getting paid. And, it was sad to me because I knew when I worked for the group. So as an emergency medicine, my group was 24 doctors, of which 2 were females, and me being one of them. And I was not a partner yet. And I wasn't, long story of why I probably would have been a partner, but my boss, one of the things he said to me, the lead of the group, said, women should be home having babies. I mean, this was like right after I started. I'm like, whew, that's, but you get that a lot in medicine back then, and still now it still happens. And I knew that wasn't great, but I never thought that I would get paid less. And so nobody really talked about it. But then one of my friends had just become partner. He was a male. And so he finally got to see the books, and he said, Carolyn, you're the most productive physician and you get paid the least. And so this was, I had already gone back to school. I'd opened my practice and financial plan. I was just going to take care of my running buddies because I'm a runner, and my ER doctors. I wasn't going to be like doing this for real. And once I found that out, and I had gone to this conference, and they said, nobody's going to take you seriously as a financial planner until you quit medicine. And I'm like, yeah, I just have a hard time doing that because that was my safety net, right? And so when I learned that, I went to the boss, the one who said I should be home having babies, and I said, I didn't tell him my friend had told me because I didn't want to get my friend in trouble. I said, I know I'm very productive for this group, and I want a raise. Here's the raise I want. And he said no. And I'm like, I'm out of here. And I had talked with my husband in advance, and I'm like, this isn't fun, and the way people are treated in medicine for me wasn't good, and so here I am.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's an interesting concept. I have heard it before for some other firms, industries, et cetera. I don't see it in practice used very often, but I can see how that can make a change. And I guess also having conversations like this can also open up the lines of communication. And I'm sorry that person said that. I like, you probably saw my facial expressions.
Yeah.
I'm like, what year is it that this happened?
Right.
I'm like, are you kidding me? But I guess, it's still happening.
Yep. It unfortunately is. I feel like, in fact, we're kind of going backwards a little bit.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. But hopefully, we just got to keep standing up.
Yeah. Well, Carolyn, it's been a pleasure having you on. And we end each of our shows asking our guests the same final question, because our listeners listen for this. They want to know, because we are the Mitlin Money Mindset. We're all about joy. And that is, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Well, I actually have a routine every morning. I get up, I have my tea, I write in my journal, and I have a nature sanctuary in my backyard, a bird sanctuary, and I raise mealworms to feed my birds. And so it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland. I go out, and not Alice in Wonderland, what's the Seven Dwarves, where the butterflies and the birds are falling.
Yeah.
I go out in the yard and all the birds come,
Snow
and
White.
and I feed all the mealworms. And so I just have this great sanctuary to start my day, and it puts me in a great frame of mind to do good things.
Do you fish as well? Because you could be, I'm sure you're set there too. For
yeah,
fishing,
that's
right?
Earthworms. Earthworms and mealworms are very different.
You're right. You're right. You got me there. You got
Yeah.
me there. I wasn't thinking. I was thinking in the wrong worms, because I used to have earthworms outside, out back, or during the summer months, so I'd have plenty of bait for fishing. So.
Yeah, no, don't fish, but I just hate looking at their little faces when I catch them, so I let other people do that. But yeah,
Fair
the
enough.
mealworms, the birds like to eat. So
Understood. Yeah, I could see how that could be incredibly relaxing and joyful. So thank you for sharing that. Our listeners love hearing that. And, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes about you, about Life Planning Partners. But if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, so they can go right now and do that, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
Well, my speaking website, where I put all my talks and how to reach me for speaking engagements, is CarolynMcClanahan.com. That's easiest. And then lifeplanningpartners.com is my business website. I'm on Twitter, even though I'm not tweeting so much anymore. I'm moving over to Blue Sky and there, and so you can find me at Carolyn MCC on Blue Sky or at Twitter, and I think that's plenty of places to find me.
Yeah, well, hopefully they'll reach out, learn more about you and your story. I appreciate you. Our listeners certainly will appreciate this conversation, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. Dr. Carolyn McClanahan, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your journey, and your passion for helping people navigate the powerful connection between health and wealth. Your insights today have given us all a new perspective on financial planning that truly puts life first. To our listeners, if this episode inspired you to rethink your financial future, take action today. Keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, build a life that aligns with your values and well-being. Until next time, stay mindful, stay motivated, and keep striving for financial freedom. Dr. Carolyn McClanahan and Life Planning Partners can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.